Great. Welcome everybody to the community conversation. It's great to see everybody, and I'm glad to see some cameras enabled and some folks smiling faces. Welcome. So I'm Seema Patel. I am with Collective Mind. I'm a senior advisor. We hold these community conversations roughly once a month. Every once in a while we throw in a special one where the format is a little bit different. But today I just wanted to start off with a little bit about Collective Mind, and then I'm going to throw it over to our co-host because that's really what we're here for. I'll keep admitting folks. So for those who have not been to a Collective Mind event or to one of our community conversations, I just wanted to let you know a little bit about what Collective Mind does. We're here basically to work with networks and network practitioners, and we have multiple aspects of which we approach these relationships with networks and network practitioners. One side is focused on consulting for networks. So we help networks to design or redesign their networks, to develop and strengthen the capacity of network teams through trainings and coaching. We work with networks on their strategy and strategy development. And we also do assessments and evaluations using our proprietary diagnostic and assessment frameworks. The other side of what we do are events like this. So really working on trainings, events, conversations with the folks who work for networks to help them build and advance their skills and approaches, to co-create solutions, and to connect and share opportunities and spaces so that you can learn and experience alongside your network peers. So these community conversations are just one example of that. We have a number of other activities that I'll pull up a really brief slide about at the end of the conversation, but it's really all about providing the space and us facilitating the space so that you all can learn from each other. So that's what we're here to do today. And hopefully you'll be able to walk away with something very practical about adapting your network's theory of change within your own network context. And so with that, I am going to ask you to just quickly type in your name, the name of your network, and your location in the chat while I go over the format for today. So we, right after I'm done talking, which will be any second now, I'm going to turn the controls over to our gracious co-hosts, and they will speak for, I'd say, maybe 20-30 minutes about their topical experience on adapting a network's theory of change within your own network. And then we're just going to take a really short break, 3 to 5 minutes, for you to introduce yourself, get a little warmed up and getting to know each other, and reflect on what you just heard. And then we'll bring everybody back, and the majority of the rest of the time will be spent in conversation. So it's really that simple. I'm going to go ahead and believe the next slide. Yes, I'm going to turn it over to my co-hosts. So please, join me in welcoming Carri Munn from Context for Action and Amelia Pape from Converge. Thank you both so much for joining and hosting this conversation with me.
Thanks, Seema. It's good to see everyone. And we are going to shift into sharing a couple slides of our own. Thanks, Carri. And I just wanted to do a quick introduction of Converge, which is a network of consultants that supports networks and network leaders around the world. We also all have our own independent practices. So Carri and I are both collaborators and partners at Converge, and Context for Action is Carri's independent practice, but we collaborate here at Converge together. And we wanted to begin by talking about our interpretation of how networks create impact in the system, because this is sort of the basis for how we help people think about networks differently, what makes networks more appropriate in complex situations when the challenge or the problem at hand aren't necessarily linear and there aren't obvious beginning and end points, and so they need to be addressed from many angles at once. So let's just quickly talk about the network theory of change. which looks fairly simple. And to many of you, I imagine might feel quite intuitive, but this is the simple story of the way that networks are able to create system change in a complex environment. And that begins with connection, which is to say that systems must be connected. And by systems, I mean the actors in the systems or the humans in the systems must be connected in order to establish a foundation by which all other things can happen. So we begin by building trusting relationships to enhance our understanding of our context and to get a sense for our interdependence as a whole. And that begins to build a sense of trust and understanding, which encourages people to start communicating with one another more regularly and to be willing to support each other's work. So we get into this coordination stage of the theory of change when we start to see people communicating and coordinating more regularly, being willing to pick up the phone or the email or the Zoom or whatever the medium is and saying, now that I know you and I know what you do, I have a question for you about something that I think you could support me on, or I'd like to offer some thoughts about something I know you're working on. And then we start to see value distributing across the system because people are supporting the work that already exists. Silos start to break down. We see information flowing through those connections that we've created, and learning accelerates, and we have this sort of bigger ecosystem awareness. And then from that place, we get into the collaboration phase, which is really about emergent collaboration. So this is when we have a sense for ourselves as a whole, we trust one another, we understand that we have a shared purpose in the system, and we understand each other's work. And then we start to see opportunities emerge to collaborate on different scales. And one of the things that is unique about networks that I'm sure that you all know is that typically there's not just one big collaboration that happens. It's often sort of like a garden where emergent things begin to grow in the form of new collaborations. And then as a collection, the story of all of those collaborations begins to create that system change or that impact at scale. So this is essentially the short story of how networks create impact, and Carrie can share a little bit more context about each of those developmental stages.
Thanks, Amelia. So I'm going to bring us through some pictures that help to reinforce the feeling and the understanding of these concepts and tell the story again in a slightly different way. So as Amelia says, we think of the network theory of change beginning with connection as the basic unit of network vitality. And a thriving network is effectively bringing together diverse people and skills and perspectives to create a whole that's greater than the sum of its parts. And weaving and strengthening those connections is an ongoing process. So something that the network is going to be attending to throughout its life as people come and go in relationship to whatever purpose that network has been organized for. And then in coordination, the objective is to really help people see the network as a whole, see the whole picture. So networks strive to facilitate a kind of natural coherence in a system, but so that over time, the many parts intentionally move toward a common good. So network coordinators are often the kind of catalysts in the cultivation of the ability to see the whole elephant by engaging the members in conversations about how to create change in their system. And when people are openly sharing information about their experience, their needs, their challenges, they can then coordinate across their complex system to amplify each other's work. And then once they have a shared context, they can act together within that shared context. So new collaborations, many of them, can emerge when people are connected, when they see themselves as part of a larger whole, and they understand how they can contribute to achieve the purpose. So people get inspired to address challenges, come up with ideas to fill gaps, and then create new initiatives together that they might not have created before. So like in this image, the foreground and the background both become visible. And metaphorically, lions and gorillas come together under one tree to care for each other and the water and these little fish that you see jumping in the background. And where does all this go? Well, it when the network is connected and people are communicating and learning and sharing best practices, providing mutual support across the system, the network can behave like this murmuration of starlings. It can become a unique and functional entity that is greater than the sum of its parts. The system is coherent and it's intelligent and responsive and adaptive and resilient in the face of change. So embracing emergence then replaces the need to control and plan. And holistic collaboration enables innovative ideas to spark and surface and be put into practice more efficiently. So this is kind of our great hope, is that we can together behave more like this murmuration of starlings, living in responsive relationship with our environment. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Amelia.
So we just wanted to get a quick sense for how this is landing for you as we move forward, and we'll have a longer opportunity to reflect. But when you think about how networks that you work with or networks that you're in create impact, if you can see the annotation function, we'd love for you to just place a little stamp or whatever you want somewhere on the spectrum based on how closely this aligns with the way that you think and talk about networks. From it's completely different and this is a totally new concept, to this is almost precisely the way that I think about it, or somewhere in the middle. Where do you land on this spectrum? You can just populate your little mine should obviously be at the very end since we did this presentation. Cool, so it looks like we are speaking similar language to many of you, which is exciting to see. And if it's very different from the way that you think about it, even if you weren't able to place your stamp on the spectrum, we're also really excited to hear about that too. But it looks like we've got mostly alignment. Wonderful. Thank you for that. Okay, well, we'll move into an example based on some client work that we were able to do with another network.
So this is the part that we're really excited about sharing. And you know, like networks, we are a network at Converge and we run a lot of experiments. And Amelia and I were in a context where the client said, you know, this theory of change is great, but we need to really be able to communicate the theory of change for our network. And so to collaborate more effectively, network members and the stakeholders need more than just this general theory of change. Like, that's helpful, but they want to be able to speak to what they're doing in their context. So we created this activity for our clients to collectively articulate the transformation process involved with moving from where they start with the people in their ecosystem and the system change that they organized to achieve. And so this activity, which is right now, I'm showing you a picture of what's on the mural board. It focuses on identifying key shifts and the network's particular role in facilitating those key shifts. So we started by asking people, okay, so what's the first challenge in the system? How are people coming in? And then looking at the bookend of systems impact. What are the changes that you'd like to see? What does transformation look like in your vision, in your wildest dreams? What do you want to see happen? And then we invited teams, and this is all over Zoom. So this was, you know, Amelia and I were a little bit nervous behind the scenes, like, is this going to work? Are people going to understand? Are all their screens going to work? But we can tell you now, or more specifically later, how the details of that happened in real time. But we invited these teams over Zoom, about I think there are about 8 or 9 people in each of 3 groups, to articulate in each of these connection, coordination, and collaboration arenas what were the challenges that they were seeing, and what shifts did they hope to create in each stage? And what was their role as network coordinators to facilitate those shifts? So how could they understand their contribution and what were they hoping to see? So then they can get specific about what they were doing and how they were relating to the folks within their network. So each of these teams articulated the shifts and their roles, and we rotated them through groups. So each of the groups had time with each of the segments to generate some content, and then add commentary at the bottom under challenges and questions and insights, which I'm now seeing still has your stars and hearts. And if anybody knows how to erase those so they're not in your way, I'm happy to do that, but this is new for me.
Me too.
So this whole activity lasted about 45 minutes. We did come in to the session. If you all are thinking about working with your own networks, we did come in with the current state of the system and the system impact. Those Post-it notes pre-populated from some conversations and some survey work that we did. So we gave people a place to ground and to begin. And then the session that was focused on customizing the theory of change was really focused on populating these three areas in the middle. And I don't know, I'm not seeing the chat. Amelia, are you able to share with folks the link to the mural board so that they can explore on their own if they like?
Let's see. I also I think that maybe the host has to do it, but in the annotate function, if we hit clear, it's not working for me, that should get rid of these little things here. And I will find the mural link.
That worked. I could clear it.
Oh,
so
great.
While Amelia's sharing the link with you, it'll give you access to the mural board so you can explore on your own and look in more detail at the little instructions that we were giving folks. And you'll see even off to the side a little piece that we brought in to help people know when it was time to change groups, because they were working asynchronously in breakout rooms in Zoom and we didn't have direct communication with them, so we used visual communication. But what's interesting and I think important is to be able to show you, okay, so what did folks end up with? So this is from one of the clients, and we're just going to show you quickly that they populated and then summarized. So on their way toward being able to tell the story of their own network's theory of change, they summarized, okay, these are the most important things that we talked about. The shifts from how people are and what we share and do and where we are going together and the changes that we hope to see. So this looks like, for example, people are coming into their community kind of in silos and they're frustrated with the way things are. But then what they end up connected and aware of what each other are doing. And the way that the network supports that is by storytelling and creating spaces for people to tell their stories. And then in coordination, people may feel like they're not sure where to begin. This is an impact investing network and they don't know a lot about impact investing. So the staff, what they want is for people to feel confident about that. So the staff provides tools and creates spaces for learning and sharing. And then people become ready to be open and challenged and inspired. And they end up in a place where they feel comfortable experimenting with one another. And the staff supports that container for experimentation with tools and practices. So that in the end, folks are feeling empowered to, with their education and their conscious deployment of capital, to make a difference that they aspire to in the world that attracted them to that particular network. So that's an example of what you can end up with. And then I will advance to what happens when the network does the work of consolidating that information from their workshop.
Great. And I think I may finally have this link for you all. So this is essentially the product of many sort of more consolidated syntheses of the activity that we just shared. And we have a longer version of this, but this is the one page that's meant to help articulate what is it that this network is doing in order to create the change that they describe. And this was an interesting client because they were doing so much work already. They weren't trying to imagine what they could do, they were already in it. And this was just a practice, as Carrie just described, of really thinking clearly about how to articulate that to the uninitiated. And so you can see sort of the connection, coordination, collaboration elements of the theory of change that we described in the beginning. And then we took some of those shifts that Carrie was describing, what's the current state and what's the future state, and how do we facilitate that as the core of this network. A for A, or Alliances for Action, is the name of the network. And we just brought forth some of the key activities that happen within each of these developmental stages, which you can see in these bullet points here, which lead to the transformation of value chains, which is what this network is working on. And the purpose of the network sort of sits at the top. And so even though we say in networks, outcomes are emergent, you can't always predict the type of impact that you will create, we do have the purpose that everyone is orienting around. And we know that the purpose will sort of be the umbrella of all of the activities and the container that the activities occur within. And then when we get to that transformation, there's an opportunity to kind of dive into more of the details of what that actually looks like. So in this case, for example, value chain transformation might look like more inclusive, sustainable, ethical, climate smart, culturally sensitive, integrated and adaptive, transparent and traceable value chains. And all of those words could probably have a book written about each of them. So the opportunity here is to continue to define and understand what that actually means in the context of this particular system. And this is a tool that this network's been able to use to do some storytelling and some new team onboarding and some support for new market and new partner development. So that is all of our slide sharing, but we just wanted to close with some basic thoughts about what we can do from here, what we're thinking about doing from here. And one of the things that we've found has been really exciting to dive into is, what does it mean to actually assess how we're doing in this? What does it mean to evaluate progress in a network context? So if we have this theory of change and we know that value transfer, or I'm thinking value chain now, that system change or system transformation is not typically linear and it's not typically fast, it's really important for people to feel like there's progress to be made and that they're on the right track. And so when we think about the theory of change, another way to think about it is, how do we create the conditions for impact to emerge, or for collaboration to emerge that creates impact? And the conditions might be considered those of a healthy network. And so if we think about the attributes of a healthy network, we have kind of 4 ways that we think about those. And we don't need to go into the details of that today. Maybe that's another conversation, but we have been exploring particular attributes of network health and associated tools to assess them, to help people really feel that sense of progress in order to sort of sustain ongoing engagement and collaboration, and to honor the linear thinkers who want to know if they're doing a good job and who want to feel like we're moving in the right direction. Even though emergence is important, it's not total chaos. So that's been an interesting evolution in our work here. Carrie, what would you add to that?
I think that at least in our practice, we're in this dance of helping folks foreground the process of transformation and change, and the concept that networks are developmental and evolutionary. And so we're starting to look at the relationships between how things move rather than static objects, which tend to be the more traditional logic models, log frames, things like that, where you're looking at state and quantifying things and outputs, rather than what's happening to generate the shift in state from one thing to another thing. And so when we talk about the role of facilitating the state change, and we talk about the state that things are shifting to. So you can see the stages, but you can also imagine that things are like a child growing up. It's going to crawl, and then it's going to walk, and then it's going to run. And those things are, you know, you can look at any one of them as a snapshot and take a picture of your toddler and say, oh, this was the day that they took their first step. And then show a video of them a little bit later running. Those are intermediated and interspersed with a lot of developmental steps, and being able to pull that forward and help people think about their relationship to that developmental process helps things to be more fluid. And so we're experimenting, and this is one of those ways, with helping people relate to that story and to do that together so that the network can understand the ways that it can intervene in a system to help facilitate that evolutionary process.
Thank you so much. I have so many thoughts of my own that I want to reflect on, but this is not for me. This is for everybody else. So what we usually like to do at this point is just break everybody up into very small groups so that you can reflect on the presentation and how it applies to your own context. And then we'll come back and open it up for questions, reflections, and experiences. So I have some breakout groups already formed, and so I'm gonna move you all into groups, and then we'll bring you back in about 3-4 minutes. So see you all soon. Hope you stick with us. Thanks. Welcome back, everybody.
Hello.
Hello, I'm glad you were able to get some time together. Let's open it up. What came up for you in these conversations? What were you reflecting on?
Okay, I made group with SECDAMs. There were a lot of common things. Both of us are consultants, so we share more or less our tasks right now. So I'm going to talk a little bit, and then he will complement. I don't know how many minutes we have. Okay, both of us are consultants, and in my case, I'm the person who is going to evaluate for an international organization like him, different organizations, and network in a Latin America country where all the members are so heterogeneous and with so many challenges. So somebody put together that network. That's one of my main questions, how they have to be born or support from outside or by themselves. And the other thing that we found out is that in both of our cases, the network have resources from outside to support the work of the members. And there are also other challenges that I don't know if SEC wants to contribute, what we were finding.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm at kind of the earliest stages of one of our kind of network building and alignment projects. And we had one of our first engagements where this large network of stakeholders at the regional level just came together. It just was on Monday, actually. And we're quickly battling against competing priorities and different constraints, especially like time constraints. A lot of these people involved are higher level executives and executive directors and things like that. So they're already trying to keep their head above water around other priorities. And then they have this thing that they know is important, but it's not maybe on the top 5 of their like priority list. So we're trying to figure out ways that we make it a higher priority that's aligned with their other initiatives internally at their own organizations to create this collaborative network in a way. So that's a challenge that we're we're in the early stages of that. When at that chart before, the kind of the connection collaboration piece, that's been pretty difficult. So yeah, that's kind of our share, where we're at, what we talked about.
Yeah, I want to add something that I found very interesting in this network, and I don't know if you, like Seg, found in some of the networks you have been reviewing or checking out. This network is supposed to be made up of public entities, private, and civil society. And they have found a lot of trouble, as Seg was said, trying to make the private sector participate in the network. Actually, the network is looking forward to fight corruption in the country. So, of course, the private sector and big companies, they will be maybe reluctant to be part of this network because they might be bidding in public, in the procurement process in the public sector. So there's so many issues that they might be dealing with, conflict of interest, things like that. And also make the public sector the main entity of auditing public procurement, how much they are able to, or want to share and collaborate with civil society. So it's a challenge. So my question will be, how successful can be trying to build a network of an issue so important, but where every member might have different agenda? Okay, yeah.
Happy to share thoughts, but I know we're in the midst of many network practitioners, so if others have reflections, we'd love to hear them too.
I see a hand up from Sylvia.
Yes, thank you. First of all, I would like to thank the presenters. I thought the presentation was really good and very practical, which is really helpful. I work for an interfaith network, a global interfaith network called the Global Network of Religions for Children. I'm the coordinator for Latin America and the Caribbean. And I wanted just to share something that we've developed in the years with the network, because it's the theory of change, like the components you presented, made me think of our approach that we developed, which is an interfaith approach. We developed it as an interfaith approach to our advocacy work, but I thought it's very similar in the sense that it also builds on three main components, which are, first of all, the engagement part. So engaging with other, in our cases, with other faith communities and faith-inspired organizations to broaden the support for children's rights and well-being, which is what we want and our vision. And then the second one is really standing together for a cause. So sort of promoting interfaith dialogue, and that made me think of the second step that you presented. So engaging in interfaith dialogue to develop this shared vision, and that's where, by encouraging interfaith dialogue, the common interests and the shared values emerge, and of the diverse faiths, right, involved, and then that's where the common narrative can be comes up, right, and is developed. And then the final component for us is the acting, right? So it's moving from interfaith dialogue to interfaith collaboration. And that's where we have the collaborative efforts that are shaped by this interfaith dialogue and this shared vision and shared purpose. So I thought it was very, and we also see it as a non-linear and process and iterative, so to say. So I thought it was very, your three, the connection, coordination, and collaboration, fitted nicely and was very much aligned to our way of, and our experience as an interfaith network for the rights of children. Thank you.
Really good to hear about the parallels and also about other experiences and challenges folks are having. What else is coming up? What other questions do we have?
Yeah, we have a question from Zach. And I also wanted to, if anybody, we can go back and forth. There's no order to any of this. So if anybody had any reflections about Betty's questions, jump in. Maybe I'll pause there for a moment before we go over to Zach's question.
Am I right to interpret them as similar questions, Betty? and
Yeah,
Zach?
I say they're fairly similar. Yeah, is that accurate? That was my impression. Betty, is that accurate? Yeah, okay. So the question is, how do you initiate that first stage of connection when there are strong competing priorities and pressures? So Amelia, Carrie, or anybody else, feel free to jump in.
I'll jump in and offer one small thing, and that is one of the things that I like to do is focus on where is the common ground. So honor the diversity and acknowledge that because we come from many different life experiences and professions and places in the ecosystem that will have different views, but there's a purpose at the center that's bringing us all together and calling us into the room. So why is it that you showed up to this meeting or to this conversation today? And that starting point can be helpful to open up the things that people care about and help them see each other's relationship to that purpose at the center. And we don't always need people to adopt the same perspective or the same point of view. And sometimes saying just that can be relieving to people and help them open up even 10 or 20% more.
I might just add a little bit to that and say that one of the benefits of networks is the diversity of perspective. And with that often comes the sense of, especially in the early stages, the sense of competing priorities. So when we are in that early stage of connection, we always talk a lot about building trust, especially in the beginning and then throughout the life of a network. And when we talk about building trust, it's not because we want everyone to like each other. It's because we know that there will be disagreements, because we know that there will be competing priorities. And if we begin with that foundation of trust, then the group is more able to navigate those differences, different points of view, feelings of competition without just dissolving or retreating or kind of becoming losing the coherence of the group. And so we focus really deeply on building trust for impact is the way that we like to phrase it, in order to navigate those conflicts more gracefully. And then over time, as people trust each other and they're orienting around that shared purpose, that feeling of competition starts to shift a little bit into opportunities to do different things. When people realize, like Carrie said, you don't actually all have to have the same point of view, and you don't even have to be doing the same thing. We just trust each other to have this shared purpose at heart and to have our best interests at heart. And then it feels a little bit less chaotic and more kind of open. And so that practice of building trust feels like it's always at the core of how we navigate those things.
Yeah, I think oh, Paula, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to build on that a little bit to also, because I'm looking at the question, part of that question is how do you initiate? And I do think there's a role for, someone or more than one to be in that sort of catalyst, space where thinking about the system and who has a stake in this purpose and just to do some one-on-one invitations, conversations, right? To just actively think about who needs to be in this. And sometimes that one-on-one invitation can really make a big difference at the beginning.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think, and I'm seeing these other questions which feel like offshoots of what we're already talking about, and really anchored in building that trust and relationships between folks. But maybe there's some more elaboration here. So how to manage participate. Yes, any specific experiences about how to manage participation when different people have different entry points. So for example, organizational executive directors are the ones to officially join the network, then their staff find themselves being asked to participate.
That is a tricky one. And I also feel the resonance with Zach's point at the beginning about, you know, the executive directors trying to keep their heads above water when they're really busy, and having the energy to catalyze the network with leadership. And so where is the leadership, and where is the investment of time and energy and attention coming from in the network is a really important question. And, you know, everything is kind of connected. So I also see threads into the question about addressing power as well. And at least in my experience, things take a lot more time than we expect. But in the sort of evolutionary process, what I hope for when I'm thinking about how to initiate a network is to have people very clear about the purpose and about, you know, where the boundaries are around the purpose, but also how much room there is within that purpose for people to do different things. And what feels really important is for the CEOs and the leaders of different participant organizations to have a sense of sponsorship and championship of the work of the network, even if they aren't directly the ones who are showing up and participating. And then I have often found myself in the network coordinator role or facilitator role, making sure that the network takes time to ensure that those feedback loops back to the organizations are happening. And so I, you know, emphasize communication and do what I can from my role as network coordinator, and also encourage the members and have the conversations. So what of this conversation needs to go back to your organization, and help people imagine what they would say and how they would deliver the important sort of news that is emanating from the network, from the conversations. What's important to share, what's important to take back, how do we incorporate and make space for the feedback when we design the next meeting. So I'm going to step back and let others jump in.
I have a question, Michelle Wilson here. So in thinking about the network theory of change, I'm also wondering when you start thinking about the type of network, which comes first? Like, does your theory of change kind of dictate the type of network you are, or the type of network you want to be? Because just like, which comes first? The tofu or the soybeans? I'm vegan, I don't say chicken or egg. So, so which comes first? So I'm interested in that, in your thoughts, if that even makes sense.
I'm wondering if you could say just a little bit more about what you mean when you say type of network.
So yeah, so we've been thinking, so we are a network of collaboratives, and we've been having discussions about, and this is all born out from some reading we've done on the right network for the right problem. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that, but it talks about whether you're a sharing network or an execution network or an impact network. And then there are other types of networks, but just in terms of, there's particular criteria for each one of those networks, right? In terms of what the membership looks like, what do you do, the accountability, all that kind of stuff. So in some ways I can see when you're thinking about your network theory of change, and that should dictate the type of network you are. But I also think if you're talking about your network theory of change, you could probably still dig a little further and talk about whether or not that's done through sharing, execute. And I'm just using those as examples, right? Because that's what's put out there mostly as sharing or execution or impact. And so, and if you're talking about the type of network you are, it doesn't necessarily mean that's the type of network you want to be, right? Does that make sense?
I think my first reaction to that is that in my experience, it can be helpful to begin with this theory of change as a general story of how networks tend to be successful in creating impact, specifically because so often many of us are used to being in hierarchical systems. That's just the way much of the world operates and how we often default. So it can be useful in the very early stages to just say, generally, this is the way that networks work, and it might feel pretty differently. And you might be thinking differently, you might be behaving differently in this context. And then from that foundation of what might be different about it, then there's a lot of opportunity to adapt and to kind of go deeper into those questions about what are our agreements and how do we want to be here in this specific network and what does the impact look like that we're trying to create. But I think for me, it's been useful to just establish that shared understanding of what's different about a network approach early as just a general story before we start getting into the specifics.
Thank you. Oh, I thought somebody else was going to say something, but oh, thank you.
Can I make it's kind of a question? I like very much the theory of change you presented is more or less close to a process analysis of what you have to have in each phase of the process for your network to work, which is really worked for me. So what is the role of I'm going to answer maybe myself. So the role of the coordinator of the network is to use different tools to make the members of the network consolidate at that stage and then be able to pass to the next step, like from connections to collaboration. Collaboration and then coordination and then collaboration. Can you comment on that?
Yes, one of the clients from the example in our conversation, they came up with the description that they were sharing with their team about weaving the strands of the theory of change. So the connection, the coordination, and the collaboration, they began imagining as the three strands of the activities in the healthy network that they were facilitating. So they could have a conversation about, okay, well, we're always starting with connection because that's where we begin. And that enables this and enables the coordination, then the collaboration. But we recognize the need to attend to all three in an ongoing way once all of them have initiated. So there is, yes, a process conversation, but then there's also a weaving conversation about how are we attending to them simultaneously in the cultivation of the network.
Sorry, simultaneously, you mean talking to them about the three, at the same time about the three stages they are going to be evolving into, right?
Yeah, because the three stages are not, they're not discrete. There's not one, then one, then one. It's one that continues all the way along, and then another one that comes to join, and a third one that comes to join that. And then towards the end, as you're getting closer to systems impact, you are nurturing and attending to all of them, because as you get close to, for example, the collaboration, you may have new partners joining because they are really excited about the collaboration that someone, or the experiment or the pilot project that someone has created, and they want to join and get involved in it. But then you can't just allow them to show up without attending to their connections or helping them understand, how do we coordinate around here? What might people be expecting of you? And what would you share when you come into this context? What does that look like for you? So all three things happening.
Carri and Amelia, thank you so much. Thank you all for joining this conversation. I know that there's probably more thoughts to be shared and more conversation to be had, but alas, we only have an hour for this conversation, so maybe there's a follow-up. Feel free to trickle off, but while while I'm closing up, I'm just going to quickly share a few things. So for anybody that's interested, Collective Mind we hold these monthly. And if you're interested and have a topic that you want to share, just email me. You all have my email addresses. We can open up, the space for somebody else to share an experience and then spur another conversation like this. And then we also have a Collective Mind Academy that's going to start running from October 4th onwards for 10 weeks, 2 modules per 2 weeks. You can join for the full semester or by individual module, but look on the website, there's lots more information there, as well as a number of other upcoming opportunities that might be of interest. So sign up for our newsletter, email me, reach out in whatever way feels most comfortable to find out the information that you like, but there's lots of opportunities, and thank you all for joining. And yeah, we hope to continue to see your faces at future events. And thanks, Carrie and Amelia again. Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, take care all.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.